Welcome to the Action Network Fantasy Flex podcast here on the Fantasy Flex feed. I am your host, Chris Raybon, joined by my guy, Sean Kerner. And on this pod, we are going to talk some waiver ads. We're going to talk our instant reactions to week one, and we'll give you some Monday Night Football player props as well. So Sean, what's going on, man? How was your week one?
It was pretty eventful. Got a lot of things right, got a few things wrong, and just there's so many surprises that happen. You know, the 49ers running back situation, just pure chaos, but I love it. I'm happy football's back. How about you? How was your week one?
It was pretty profitable. You know, obviously there were a couple of things like I wish I could take back, like Marquez Callaway. You were on top of that with Jair Alexander. I mean, they just didn't throw a lot in that game either.
Yeah.
You know, that one wasn't great. I even after talking down Kyle Pitts all season, like I ended up using him on DraftKings, so that didn't go great either. But overall, betting profitable week one, DFS still profitable, and yeah. So I'm excited now that we have some data. We'll talk a lot about usage and snaps and routes and who everyone should pick up. But I want to start, and let's go position by position here. On the Fantasy Flex podcast presented by Prize Picks. I want to start by just asking you about some quarterbacks who I think people want to know the reactions because they have to kind of start them. So Aaron Rodgers, was I just a year too early on this Aaron Rodgers is done thing? Or is this just a product of New Orleans having that really great coaching staff all year to prepare? Or is it because of this, you know, the chaos that happened with Rodgers and maybe he's not as into it? Maybe there was like, was there some kind of letdown after coming so close? And maybe now it's just a combination. Like, what the hell happened with Aaron Rodgers in that 38-3 loss?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out as well. It is probably his worst start of his career, right? It had to be.
I mean, right up there with the Tampa Bay and San Francisco fiascos over the last couple.
Yeah, those were fun too. But you knew right away it was not meant to be. And yeah, I just think with Rodgers, I think a lot of the offseason stuff, it makes you wonder if that's what's leading to this. You know, he wants out of there at the end of the year. So I would assume it is playing a role, but you know, I had the under on this game because they moved it to Florida and, you know, Green Bay is a cold weather team. I thought that could have an impact, and maybe that did have a bigger impact than people think. But they just did not look right. I do think, you know, they'll right the ship this week against the Lions. If they struggle this week against the Lions, that's the time to really start to consider, you know, the offseason probably did really set the Packers back a ton. But I'm not panicked quite yet. I think we can just kind of like forget that game ever happened when it comes to guys like Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams. I think if you can buy low on them now, you know, maybe there's an owner out there that, you know, wants to get rid of them. So I'm not panicking quite yet, but it does make you think that the offseason stuff could be making an impact.
I have the numbers in front of me from that Lions game against the 49ers. And this was with, you know, Brandon Ayuk not at full strength. This was with Jimmy Garoppolo coming back from an injury. The 49ers completed 18 of 26 passes and averaged 11.5 yards per attempt. Okay. The Packers have a better quarterback and a better number one receiver. Deebo Samuel put up a Devontae Adams line. Deebo Samuel looked like Tyreek Hill. The Lions made Deebo Samuel look like Tyreek Hill in week one. This is the get right spot for the Pack. Don't worry about Rodgers. Next quarterback is Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill looked, and that whole offense looked pretty bad. They couldn't run with Henry. Was that just kind of a product you think of the Cardinals playing Henry well? Because we know Tannehill relies on the play action. Was it? I hesitate to say it's Arthur Smith because Arthur Smith's got the doors blown off of his new squad as a favorite at home by Philadelphia and a quarterback that no one thought could throw. So. I mean, what's going on with Tannehill? Personally, I think it had a lot to do with Taylor Lewan coming back from injury.
Yeah, that and, you know, Chandler Jones had a good game. This game was a mess. And, you know, the past couple years I've bet against Ryan Tannehill and failed miserably. And then I start backing him up going into the season and then he fails miserably. So I can't get Ryan Tannehill right for the life of me. But I think, you know, he will bounce back this week. And if you can buy low on him, I would do that as well. But that game was definitely concerning to see. I saw Vrabel called out Julio Jones today, so things could start to get messy there. But I'm fading the week one noise, and I think this is a situation we still want. Derrick Henry, we still want AJ Brown, we still want Julio Jones when he's healthy. So I try to buy low on these guys if you can.
Yeah, it's not going to be as easy matchup as you think against the Seahawks this week. And they played good run defense, and they played decently on the back end as well. So, but one of the higher total games of the week. You're still starting Ryan Tannehill this week. We have another week with Julio, and then Josh Allen. I don't think we need to spend much time on him. That's a tough matchup against Pittsburgh, right? Like that's about all there.
Yeah, and he was airing it out. He just missed on some balls. The Josh Allen, he could be more inconsistent than we saw last year, but I think he's just ready to break out. I've been kind of fiddling with week two projections, and he's my number one quarterback right now. And actually Kyler Murray is now, but Josh Allen's right there, close second. So I'm still banking on him being a top 3 quarterback the rest of the way.
All right, so let's talk about guys you actually should add on waivers. And I think the first guy that comes to mind is Jameis Winston, 5 touchdown passes against Green Bay. What do you think of Jameis, and how does he compare to, I think my favorite ad is probably Tyrod. You also have Taylor Heineke, who's going to start against the Giants. So where are you on Jameis compared to some of the other options?
Yeah, I mean, he was going off in the game that I'm saying we should just throw it away, because Jameis Winston is going to have that very high ceiling, which we saw. But, any given week, he come crashing down, and Taysom Hill can still replace him. I do feel a lot better about Jameis after week 1, though, of course. But I'd be careful with him. And I'm projecting him. He's my QB 17 heading into week 2. We'll have to see how that works out. He didn't get to throw that many pass attempts, and he ended with 5 touchdowns. So I think we could expect more yards. We can definitely expect more yards from him going forward, but that touchdown rate is certainly going to regress. So he's a guy that I'd be careful just going all in and starting him over Ryan Tannehill this week. But definitely make sure he's not available, because if he figures it out under Sean Payton, and he really has limited, turnover where he throws. I don't think he's thrown one yet this season, including the preseason. So if he figures it out this year, he could absolutely be a QB1. So he's definitely worth an ad.
So there's a lot of streaming options this week. I think both quarterbacks in that Cleveland-Houston game, Tyrod going against Cleveland and then Baker Mayfield going against Houston. Both of those guys could be interesting. And then, there's no real interest in Heineke. I don't think. It should be a low scoring game against the Giants. And the Giants actually had Washington's number last year.
Yeah, I think Heineke would be an ad for the rest of the season. It seems like Ryan Fitzmagic is going to be out for a long, long time. So I think you would add Heineke in a 2 QB super flex league where you want him for multiple weeks if you're hurting at quarterback. But yeah, he's not a play this week necessarily. Giants, it's a pretty tough matchup. Should be a low scoring Thursday night football game. I like Teddy Bridgewater this week.
Oh yeah,
against the Jaguars. Right now he's QB 13. Probably going to lower that, but he's more of a high floor option. It certainly doesn't help that Jerry Jeudy is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. I'm sure we'll talk about the receiving situation in a bit, but he does have a ton of weapons there. So I think he's another good, safe streaming option where he'd give you, solid QB2 numbers this week against the Jaguars.
Yeah, Teddy stands out. That's the guy I meant to mention, because I thought he looked good. I thought he looked good against the Giants, a defense that's pretty well schemed, pretty tough to play. He made some great second reaction plays and things like that. And he was hitting guys. It wasn't just Jeudy. He was hitting the tight ends. He was getting the ball down. I mean, KJ Hamler dropped something like a 50, 60-yard touchdown on a great throw from Bridgewater. So he was making the right reads. He was moving around well. I thought he was making some second reaction plays. He wasn't just a robot. So, and Jacksonville, by the way, I mean, any quick reactions on this Jacksonville dumpster fire, which was obviously no one wanted to admit it. Like everyone was kind of like, oh, Houston's going to be that one team. But here, lo and behold, Jacksonville's going to be the reason why everyone has a low strength of schedule more than Houston, maybe.
Yeah, that was pretty bad, but we did kind of call it. We were saying,
Yeah.
take the Texans here, but that was really bad. Trevor Lawrence made some bad decisions. I think at the end of the day he's going to figure it out, but it might take a couple games. So yeah, this Jaguars team is a team that we want to attack in terms of fantasy, especially streaming defenses right now. But that was not pretty. They do look like they're going to be a pretty pass heavy team though, so I'm still interested in guys like Laviska Shenault, even DJ Chark and Marvin Jones look good. So I'm still interested in the wide receivers, but outside of that, this team looks really really bad.
Yeah, and I think an underrated guy, maybe a little deeper, because I don't expect it to be a big pass-heavy game script. But Mac Jones looked pretty good, and the Jets defense. I think Mac Jones is already better than Sam Darnold, and so there's a chance that just on pure efficiency he could go off for like 3 touchdowns. I just don't think the Patriots have to throw 39 times again. I don't think the Jets are going to be able to kind of stay in front of them like the Dolphins did. But Mac Jones, get him on the radar because he might be really good. I love some of the ball placement. Did you get to see any of Mac?
Yeah, I had the Dolphins plus 3.5, so I was watching that game
Good call.
pretty closely. And yeah, that defense is really good against rookie quarterbacks. They like to disguise coverages and blitzes. So that was a really tough matchup for Mac Jones to start. This week, I don't think he's gonna have to throw that much for them to win. So
Yeah,
I
that's the
agree.
one
I think
issue.
when we get to a game where we're gonna expect a more pass heavy game script, Mac Jones looked really, really good. So yeah, he's a guy you certainly want to add in deeper leagues.
Yeah, like he's a stash guy almost. Because like the thing is that Dolphins defense, good secondary, but this is a week where like they might not have to throw, but Mac Jones could go like Jameis Winston. Like he could go like
Yeah.
18 of 23 for like 4 touchdowns, and then everyone's gonna add him regardless. So you
Right.
might as well kind of get a week ahead of that, just because I mean I saw some of the throws I saw out of him and just the poise. I think he's gonna be good.
And
So
that's a good point because it's going to have to come from touchdowns. He's probably not going to throw a ton of 300-yard
yeah,
passing games. He's not going to rush for much. So, unfortunately, it's going to come down to touchdown luck, but certainly, 2 to 3 touchdown games for him should happen soon. But yeah, the thing with him, he does have limited upside just because the Patriots probably won't need to throw that much this year if the defense is as good as I think they'll be. And yeah, no rushing upside to speak of. He's definitely more of a high floor 2 QB super flex kind of quarterback in my eyes.
or he's Tom Brady.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Tom Brady did it with no rushing on New England, right? And
That's
no
what we're
receivers.
hoping for, right? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was a good start, is all I'm saying. I mean, even
Yes.
though they lost the game, I just thought it was a really good start
Yep.
for Mac and on all the rookie quarterbacks. I mean, we don't really everyone's already added Fields and Lance, but Lance throws a touchdown, Fields gets in the end zone. I mean, it was a good start for these guys. Zach Wilson comes back late, and shows some good stuff. Lawrence, I think maybe the most disappointing just because you had the turnovers, you lost to a team that we expected you to beat. But yeah, I thought generally speaking, it was a pretty good showing for the rookies. But speaking of Lawrence, let's go to running back here and James Robinson. I want to start with him actually because I 5 carries to Carlos Hyde's 9. I know that Houston got up out in front of Jacksonville, but it seemed like the game plan from the jump was going to be very pass heavy. Any thoughts on Robinson? Because I mean, we loved Robinson heading into the year. We thought he would just go back to doing what he was doing. And I mean, they were throwing to him a little bit here and there, but it just didn't seem like he was given that kind of respect that he deserved from the coaching staff, given what he did last year.
Yeah, this was not a good start for James Robinson. He was my RB6 this week, so that was a huge fail on my part. And I said, like, look, he's probably going to go off this week, sell high, because he's probably going to settle in as a low to low mid-range RB2, I thought, because I pointed out many times that there were about 11 games last year where no other running back had a carry. And I just thought, Carlos Hyde's going to be a pretty competent backup. He's going to have a bigger role than any other running back last year. So I was kind of worried about Robinson in that regard, but this was bad. Like if you can't have a good game against the Texans, you're in big trouble. Carlos Hyde, like you said, he outrushed him. The only positive was Robinson did run a route 63% of the time. I think he will be that pass catching back, which is good news because his Jaguars team is going to be terrible. So, PPR formats, he probably does have RB2 value, but yeah, this looks really bad. I don't know. I don't even know if you can sell high at this point. I don't know who's going to take him, but he's more of a low end RB2 going forward. I fear.
46 snaps to Carlos Hyde's 25, 36 pass plays to Carlos Hyde's 14. So it was just the carry. So you really there's potential for turnaround here, but there's a lot more uncertainty than we thought about like coming into the year. So
you would think Carlos Hyde would factor in a little bit more if the Jaguars had a positive game script. So it's really scary that Carlos Hyde was disinvolved in what was pretty much a blowout. So it's definitely panic time.
Yeah, and definitely add Hyde if like running backs. We know how tough it is to find those guys. So I mean, for now you have a guy that was leading his backfield in carries in week 1. I think he's worth an add, and maybe not as much as Elijah Mitchell. I think you do have to add Elijah Mitchell as that priority guy. And I don't know if you want to even buy low on Trey Sermon because Kyle Shanahan said the reason Sermon was a healthy scratch was Mitchell beat him out and Jermichael Hasty beat him out. So you have a rookie and a fellow rookie who had less draft pedigree. That's a bad sign. And you had a guy that was already in the system for a year that a lot of people had like 5th or 6th on the depth chart. And they also had another veteran in Wayne Gallman that they released, and Sermon still couldn't climb the chart. So like, I said at the beginning of the year, like this 49ers backfield, we're not going to know, but I'm going Mitchell here.
Well, yeah, especially after week 1, I don't blame you. And we kind of called this heading into the season. I said, it's always the running back we least expect to be the guy that goes off in this backfield. And sure enough, week 1, it's already happened. Trey Sermon was inactive. And you did make a good point that you don't even want to be involved in this headache week to week and trying to figure out who the hell it's going to be, because I wouldn't be surprised if Trey Sermon plays this week, gets 20 touches and is, borderline RB1. Like, would not surprise me at all. But yeah, right now, Elijah Mitchell, you should probably use your number 1 waiver, just because we typically don't see backup running backs as much on the waiver wire anymore. So I think now's the time to add a guy like this, because he might be this year's Jeff Wilson from last year. So I think he's definitely worth the flyer. But again, you called it. It's going to be a week-to-week decision. It's going to be very volatile. But I think that the fact that Moser is out, it sounds like 8+ games, does make me want to invest in this and try to figure it out. So I think if you can buy low on Trey Sermon, I'm talking about like RB3, RB4 value. I don't think you can get that, but I would definitely be interested in buying low on Sermon just because he does have that massive upside. But this is going to be very tricky week to week.
Yeah, I'm off Sermon. Like I think coming into the year, we were just going on draft pedigree. I think the fact that we knew he was 4th on the depth chart, like that's a lot of guys to pass. Like, yeah, Raheem Mostert always gets hurt, but like for the rest of these guys, I mean, now you're just betting on injuries. So I don't think it's like, I would just go all in on Mitchell, and, Hasty would kind of be the guy I have in the holster. Like, I think the fact that we know he was number 3 on the depth chart, the fact that we know they were willing to make him a scratch, that doesn't bode well for any time in terms of like a waiver ad. Like if another couple guys go down, sure. But yeah, I just think that was a really bad sign. Let's go to Houston. Mark Ingram knew it might be disgusting, but he had 26 carries. Ingram 36 snaps. David Johnson 22. Philip Lindsay 20. Rex Burkhead 10. So there are a lot of snaps going on. Like this was a high volume play game for Jacksonville. So Ingram still played under half of the total snaps, but so I don't think he's a priority the same way Mitchell is, because I don't think that line is good. I don't think Ingram is as good. So I think Ingram's more of a sell high. What do you think?
Absolutely sell high. The Texans aren't going to provide too many game scripts like this going forward. I think Ingram definitely took advantage of, the Texans blowing out the Jaguars. So he's absolutely a sell high, but I think he is their starting running back going forward, and like probably the most valuable back to own right now there. But if you could flip him for basically anybody that's startable, I would do it.
Yeah, I mean, you had 4 backs working in. That just creates, from like just a mathematical standpoint, the variance increases like another like 25% over the other backfields.
Yeah, and like this week at Cleveland, right? They're
12-point dogs.
12-point dog. Like, do you really think Mark Ingram's getting 23 carries? Absolutely not. So
Okay, 6 carries, 8 yards, no touchdowns.
pretty much. That's I was gonna say almost a similar line. So yeah, this is absolutely a sell high situation with Mark Ingram.
Zach Moss, droppable? Yes. Healthy scratch. Get him out of here. Next.
So you're just healthy week 1
Yep.
scratch. You're done with them.
Done. I mean, in terms of like he like we always say, right? Like you always do a good point of pointing this out. Like always stash your bench with high upside running backs. Like now that we've seen week 1 and we know where these guys are in the depth chart, there's just better like Mark Ingram's still a better option than Zach Moss because he's playing nearly half the snaps in the backfield, right? Like Zach Moss is essentially, because he's not playing special teams, he's fourth on the depth chart. Like they were using Isaiah McKenzie in the backfield and they seem fine with it. So yeah, I like Cordell Patterson, next guy up. I would add him over because they're using him as their true RB2 there. So it's like he's worth more in the immediate future, which is what you're kind of doing with these waiver ads anyway. You should have your starters already. So you're just looking for guys that like, okay, bye weeks come up, guys go down. I just need guys to plug and play. And Zach Moss might just be a goose egg for as long as we know. So
yeah, I agree. But if Singletary were to miss time, don't you think Zach Moss would be like an RB3 flex at least? Or are you now part of the Matt Breida fan club with me?
Well, I mean, the fact that Breida was active over him doesn't spell it's not, because Breida's also a better pass catching back. So that, like, again, it's like how we get into trouble with these assumptions in the first place. It's more excusable, I think, before week 1, because we're just using our educated guesses, right? But now it's like we know what these coaches are thinking. They've showed their hand. So like let's say Singletary goes down, we might say, oh, plug Zach Moss in. And the coaches may be thinking, okay, Matt Breida 2/3 of the snaps, Moss 1/3.
Right.
So yeah, like to me, I just don't think it's worth it. I think you go with what you know here, because you're like a high upside bench guy would be a guy like, you know, like a Patterson. It's like still the guys I like their talent with, but that at least will be active. Like I don't want a guy that could be a scratch. Like killing. Yeah. So Patterson, what did you think of him? He got more yards than Mike Davis, even though he got about half as many carries. But
talk about another this is, you know, not as surprising as Trey Sermon or Zach Moss, but Wayne Gallman being inactive was a bit of a surprise. And yeah, Cordell Patterson is the number 2 back, but they were using him as a true gadget player. He lined up everywhere. I think he lined up in the slot a bit. This Falcons offense looks completely different. They ran a bunch of 2 tight end sets. So, you know, Cordell Patterson could be the sort of Swiss Army knife we've expected him to be his entire career. He might actually have a breakout season. So if Mike Davis were to go down, Patterson would be the guy, it seems, that would potentially become, you know, a RB3 kind of flex option. So yeah, I'm all for swapping Patterson out. If you have Zach Moss, dropping him for Cordell Patterson, I can certainly get behind that.
Yeah. In the Jets backfield,
disaster.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at the snaps right now just so I could. Okay, so we had so I called this in my. I'm doing like a little weekly matchups column for all the Sunday games now, and it would be on ActionNetwork.com coming out Saturday. So look out for that. But I called this Ty. I said Ty Johnson. If there's going to be a hot hand approach, like I was on Michael Carter earlier in the offseason, but obviously we got negative news on him. I was like, yo, Ty Johnson would probably be the guy. Lo and behold, he plays 35 snaps. Tevin Coleman 17, Michael Carter 16. So I mean, I'm actually like I would rather have a guy like Ty Johnson on my roster than a Zach Moss who's going to be inactive at least, or could be inactive, just because I think Ty Johnson actually has shown things in the past. I think he's added some explosiveness. You know, so I'm fine with Ty Johnson. Tevin Coleman had 9 carries. Johnson had 8, I believe it was. But I could see that switching because Johnson's kind of the main pass back. Any thoughts on that backfield?
Well, first of all, this is a nightmare. If there were any backfield to kind of avoid right now, it'd be the Jets. The offensive line was brutal, and Mekhi Becton is going to be out multiple weeks now. So it's like, do we really want to invest in a 3-way timeshare behind a horrible offensive line on a horrible team? Probably not. But we were saying that Michael Carter probably going to start the year off really, really slow, really bad. So he could get dropped in your league. And I think by the end of the year, Michael Carter will probably be leading this backfield. So he's still a guy that I'd keep my eye on long-term, but right now I want nothing to do with this.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ty Johnson and Michael Carter are the 2 best backs in that backfield. So I'm again, this is for people that are in a pinch in week 1. going into week 2. I mean, I don't think it'll be a
Yeah.
great game, but it like matchup against New England, but the Jets will probably be behind, which means more snaps for Johnson, who played 20 pass snaps to Carter's 10 and Coleman's 5. So I just think short term, Ty Johnson, I think he's clearly the leader from the snap counts, leading pass down back, PPR league. If you need somebody, he's the guy. Let's go to anything else with running back. We good on that? Do we miss anything?
We're good. We'll cover a lot more tomorrow, but I think we're good for now.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, we're doing a fantasy flex 5 days a week now. Sean and I 3 times a week. We have the main big matchup by matchup episode coming out tomorrow, and then late in the week we'll have our props episode. So let's go to wide receiver and tight end. These guys, this is a less important position. I think usually you're looking for quarterback streamers or running backs, but I didn't get a chance to look at the route numbers yet. How did it break out between KJ Hamler and Tim Patrick in that Giants Broncos game? Because we know Jerry Jeudy's going to be out for a month or more.
So Hamler finished with 50% routes run and Patrick was 65%. Okay. But Patrick was getting playing time and targets before Jeudy went down. I mean, it looks like Bridgewater loves Tim Patrick. So we were kind of calling that before the year started. Like if anybody goes down, Tim Patrick's probably the guy to add. But KJ Hamler has just massive upside. So I think, both guys are definitely worth adding in your league. But it seemed like Tim Patrick was like going to be the guy that's going to see over 80% of the routes this week. So he's probably the biggest beneficiary. And then, of course, Cortland Sutton could see more targets, become a more consistent fantasy starter. But those were the routes, 50% and 65%.
Yeah, I think it's still Patrick number 1 for me, as much as I love the second-year breakout appeal of a guy like Hamler. Mm-hmm. And he did drop like a 50, 60-yard touchdown, but that's the point. Like there's a non-zero chance that when Jerry Jeudy's not out there, that Tim Patrick is the best Bronco receiver. Like he's a very unsung player. Last season, he had 5 for 119, 6 for 113 and a touch, and 4 for 101. He had 300-yard games last year. A lot of people don't remember that.
He's the Zach Pascal for the Broncos.
And he might be better. Like, I mean, Pascal's good. He gets schemed open. But like Tim Patrick, I think is actually a pretty good receiver that the Broncos just happen to have a somewhat of a embarrassment of riches at that position. But, they also have a lot of injuries. So Patrick was, and then in addition to those 300-yard games, he also had another multi-touchdown game mixed in. And so he was a pretty valuable receiver, all things considered, that he was free last year. 51 catches, 742 yards, and 6 touchdowns in 15 games. So Tim Patrick would be the guy that I would expect, that I would be willing to kind of take a flyer on. Marquez Callaway did nothing in week 1. I think he's still playable. I think it was like the matchup, but I do worry a little bit that the Saints will be a lower volume pass offense. What do you think?
Yeah, I was definitely worried about Callaway going into the season and week 1 because of the matchup with Jair Alexander. But, given how good Jameis Winston looked, and it does look like, he has a lot more job security going forward, I think that does help Callaway. And, a matchup against the Panthers, he could break loose for a couple big plays. He's still kind of right up there on that wide receiver 3 flex fringe for me. So I wouldn't panic necessarily to week 1. I already kind of thought he was going to struggle week 1. He might be a buy low candidate, honestly. And this is coming from somebody that was probably bearish on him going in the season. I just think with Jameis Winston looking as good as he did, that's kind of why I'm still believing in Callaway.
Yeah. And then for some context, Callaway, 88% of routes run. Deontay Harris was second on the team with just 60.
Yeah, and they didn't have to throw much either. So going forward, it's going to bounce back the other way.
Yeah, the routes are there for Callaway. So yeah, I would still be comfortable using him. Any love for anything outside of Lamb and Cooper in Dallas with Michael Gallup expected to miss a month or more? Cedric Wilson seemed like the guy to take over. Dallas has kind of supported 3 wide receivers in the past, just given their team makeup. But they do have the tight ends, healthy. So any love for Cedric Wilson? Simi Fioco, anybody?
No, Cedric Wilson all the way for me. I'm still mourning the loss of Michael Gallup. That's a really tough blow for me. He looked really good when he was in the game, but I just think it's going to be more Amari Cooper, more CeeDee Lamb. And Cedric Wilson, I'm still projecting him like 3.5 catches a game going forward. So he's definitely a good guy to add in deeper leagues for sure.
I mean, most of these guys should be rostered, but any thoughts on Kirk, Pascal, Deontay Harris? Harris, 60% of the routes, that's probably not enough. But what do you think about Kirk and Pascal? I think Kirk is worth kind of keeping around here because that Cardinal is going to be like a 4 deep Cardinal offense, going to be a 4 deep offense. And Kirk was always a guy that was running, like 80-90% of routes as it was. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
yeah,
he's the guy that stands out to me.
Yeah, and he might be a sell high guy, even though I kind of favored him out of this trio behind Hopkins because I thought, Rondale Moore is going to see his targets, but he has a lower ceiling just based on his playing style. And then AJ Green probably just going to run a ton of routes and maybe distract the defenders. So I thought Kirk could have a sneaky good season, but week 1, he scores 2 touchdowns. So I think he's going to be overrated. And he only ran 60% of the routes.
Yeah. So that's down. Yeah, because he was 80-90 last year.
AJ Green ran 90% of the routes. So and Rondale Moore only ran 40% of the routes. And he was a target monster. So he saw target 36% of the time he was running a route. So if you figure, I don't know why he wouldn't. His routes run should go over 50, I would say, by this week. That's going to hurt Kirk long term. Even if Kirk sees a spike in routes run, I think just AJ Green, they made it clear they want him on the field pretty much 85-90% of the time. So I would say sell high on Kirk. It's still a mess behind Hopkins, and it does look like Rondale Moore could be that sneaky guy that I think will, his value is only going to go up.
Yeah, I love Moore. Moore is I think the clear ad. I'm holding Kirk though. Like I think Green is the guy that it'll take a few games and they'll realize that he was the same exact thing that he was last year. I mean, I saw he had this end zone target where it just seemed like the defender was literally like, when you play Madden and like you have like the computer turned up all the way to all Madden. Like it just seemed like the defender was like twice as fast as AJ Green and just like batted a potential touchdown away from him.
Yeah,
I think he's the guy. I think they're gonna because Kirk can play on the outside, so yep. I think you can kind of Moore is gonna be that gadgets kind of slot. He can play everywhere too, but I think they're gonna kind of scheme him things. But Kirk, you could just kick him outside on, in like 2 wide sets and bring Green off the bench. So I think Green is a guy. If he puts up any kind of stats, I'm selling him. I'd probably drop him even now, and I'd rather have Kirk because I don't think Green is going to continue. And even if it does, he might not do anything. So low on AJ Green. And then in Detroit, I mean, we saw every wide receiver play because Tyrell Williams, you mentioned that he was out there every snap, but then he goes down. And so we see like every wide receiver here. How do we feel about Amon-Ra St. Brown now that we've seen one game? He ran 50 routes on 71 pass plays for Detroit.
Yeah, it wasn't too great, not gonna lie. I expected probably a lot more out of him. But we'll have to see what's up with Tyrell Williams. I think if he is out, I think St. Brown will eventually be, the guy in the wide receiver room. However, I think we've said this a million times by now, but this is TJ Hawkinson's offense. If anything, I'm all about TJ Hawkinson, and then just kind of the scraps left over for the receivers I'm ignoring right now. It was kind of a mess. You had guys like Khalif Raymond lead the team in routes run. Quintez Cephas did look good in his limited playing time. So it's kind of a mess for the wide receivers. I just hope you got TJ Hawkinson. Like I said, he looked really good. So I think going forward, TJ Hawkinson is going to be the only pass catcher I'm interested outside of DeAndre Swift. Of course, he looked really good as a pass catcher, but out of the wide receiver tight end room, I'm all about Hawkinson.
Oh, yeah, and also if you drafted Jamal Williams, forget Swift. Yeah. Like, good call on that because like that was. Yeah. I know he was like one of those like if I was doing like a hero running back or like a 0 RB best ball, like I was getting a lot of him, but I didn't know what to think. So I'm actually really happy in Jamal Williams too.
Yeah, so Goff dumped it off to them. 20 targets to those running backs.
And like then that's Hawkinson got another
Goff. Yep.
10. Yeah.
That's
so.
a Jared Goff offense, I guess.
Yeah, but he was competent, like it wasn't like he was terrible. So yeah, Juwan Johnson, shouts to our guy Raheem Palmer with the 10th, what was it, 10th round pick? 11th,
I think
12th
12, right after I took Dallas Goedert.
It's still too early, but it worked. 2 touchdowns for Johnson and on 2 catches. So like, what do you do with him now? Is he an add? Is he a sell if you have him? Like, how do you approach this given that he pretty much did the best possible that he could do, but he ran a route on only 10 of 25 dropbacks. That's just 40%. Less than Adam Troutman, by the way, who was 18 of 25 or 72%.
75% for Troutman. So I think that's going to be more sustainable. It would not surprise me if this is Juwan Johnson's best game. So that's typically you want to sell high. But, the targets are wide open right now without Michael Thomas. So we talked about Marquez Callaway struggling in week 1. So guys like Juwan Johnson, they still do have upside. We don't know. He could end up running over 50% of the routes this week after his good performance. So he's not necessarily, a drop right now, especially after catching 2 touchdowns. But if you want to flip him for somebody, I would certainly do it. Troutman did look like, he's going to be the leading pass catcher. Like we said, 75% of routes run. That's really high for a tight end. Granted, there weren't that many passing attempts to go around, but I think Troutman is still the guy I'm projecting for more targets out of this tight end group.
And remember, this still generally has to be a run-heavy offense just because they don't have Michael Thomas. They don't have Traquan Smith. The way the tight end snaps broke down was Adam Troutman 51, Garrett Griffin 17, Juwan Johnson 12. So in weeks, there could be weeks like this where, Johnson doesn't catch those 2 touchdowns. He straight up goose eggs. So yeah, I would definitely. I think he's going to earn his way into more time as well because he's just a good pass catcher. He's a converted wideout.
Yep.
But I would hold if I couldn't sell. I wouldn't drop, but I would hold.
Right.
Because I think there is that outside chance that he turns into like Logan Thomas or Darren Waller just because there's an opening here. But at the same time, I think the best thing you could possibly do is use those 2 touchdowns to get like someone a little more useful, and kind of guy reliable, I guess I should say. But and Tony Jones, I forgot to mention him at running back. He played 35% of the snaps, 22 to Alvin Kamara's 46. So no other halfback played. That's good news from Jones. If you kind of penciled him into that Latavius Murray role, he's in it, and he graded out really well in PFF too. So Tony Jones, make sure he's not available in your league. All right, now it is time. One more real quick. Mike Gesicki, no catches. Patriots usually do a good job of taking away key guys. Seemed like Gesicki was the guy over Waddle. But are you panicked yet on Mike Gesicki?
Yeah, I'm panicking. He ran a route 60% of the time. That's not ideal. They're going to get Will Fuller back this week. More competition for targets in an offense that I don't think is going to throw a ton. It was pretty dink and dunk. That could have been just, facing the Patriots. But since Gesicki was kind of on that tight end 1-2 fringe anyway, he kind of falls into the waiver wire territory now. So yeah, I'm definitely panicking on Gesicki.
Yeah, I'd keep him. I do it like a wait and see week, just because the Patriots and week 1, I think there's a certain way of, when you talk about guys on the field, I'll give him another week. Like the guys I'm really worried about are the guys that are straight up scratches. But yeah. I think I made a joke over the offseason with Rich Rebar that like Durham Smythe would be like the guy that gets catches for the Dolphins, and I'm pretty sure
he ran just about as many routes as Gesicki.
Yeah. That he's every once in a while there's just some guys on these teams that like don't get talked about, but that teams just like, and like Durham Smythe is obviously one of them. All right, and that is going to wrap it up for our week 2 waiver episode. You can find Sean on Twitter at @_oddsmaker. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Raybon, and you can find all of our fantasy content at actionnetwork.com, our DFS stuff at fantasylabs.com, and all of our articles and bets in the award-winning Action Network app. Make sure you subscribe to the Fantasy Flex feed. Again, giving you an episode every weekday this season. That's why we got the new feed. So please, it would help us out if you made sure to subscribe to that. If you could leave us a rating and review, that we also love that. So until we see you guys tomorrow with our matchups episode, let's get this shmoney.